So for some Newcastle fans who don't know, our goalkeeper Martin Dubravka, who we all know, we all love, part of the furniture at Newcastle in over the last 5 or 6 years, has done an interview this week talking about his time at Manchester United, his move to Manchester United and coming back since, and some of the issues that he had with fans and social media since he left. Now, this interview has left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth for different reasons, which I'm going to dissect. And a lot of things on this one, for me, just don't add up. So if you're a little bit curious, Newcastle fans, you know what to do. You need to stick around. Welcome back to Black and White Banter, you lovely, lovely Newcastle fans. Life is good, isn't it? Life is rosy in the black and white garden. Certainly is. Challenge of the Champions League, winning every week, smashing teams, scoring a shit ton of goals, and Arsenal to come on Sunday. There's not many reasons to be miserable, is there? Not many reasons to be down. With another bank holiday on the horizon as well. 2 on the spin, 3 in May. Up the mags. If you are new to Black White Banner and this face is new to you, then whoever you are, give us a little like. That goes a long way. That gets the algorithm up, gets this video to more people, and whack that subscribe if you like my opinion by the end of this. Now, this video is a little bit different, not as chirpy, you could say, to my match previews, match vlogs, and everything that's been coming at the moment. This video is about, as I said at the start, Martin Dubravka has done an interview which I would assume a lot of Newcastle fans don't even know about because it hasn't made that many mainstream media outlets. So I'm going to divulge it. If I do look away from the camera, I've got the interview in front of me on my computer just to my right. So I'm not being a rude prick, I swear to you I'm not. It's because I'm going to dissect it a little bit and then pick at it a little bit more and give my thoughts. So he's done the interview. The interview starts with, I'll just give you the gist very quickly. He talks about when Pope came in. He said Nick came here and he found himself in a difficult situation after the first game. He feels like he could and he still can perform and challenge Nick Pope for the #1 goalkeeper shirt at Newcastle. In the end, he took the loan move to Manchester United after pre-season because he felt like he needed a new challenge, but also on an averages kind of mentality. He looked at it. Manchester United are in Europe. More competitions playing in, more chance of game time because he felt like be number 2 to David De Gea, be number 2 to Nick Pope. That sounds like his logic. And yeah, I mean, he's got a point. There was more opportunities there, more cups with the European matches every Thursday and Sunday or whatever Man United were playing at the start of the season. Now I'm going to go on record before I go any further this and say I'm a Martin Dubravka fan. I always have been. Most Newcastle fans are. He came from nowhere. I still remember his debut against Man United when we beat them 1-0 on that wonderful day at St James's Park. He was unbeatable. I remember Martial going clean through and he saved it, and it was just a great day, and he's been safe as houses for us. He talks about abuse on social media and this, and I just want to sit here and say I don't condone that in any way. It's ridiculous. Everyone has a voice these days, don't they? Everyone hides behind a keyboard, whether it's inbox messages, comments. He talks about his family getting abused. He doesn't go into detail on what's been said to him from Newcastle fans. He just talks about general abuse. Those guys are idiots. Every club has them, and I'm not saying that is okay by any means, and I just wanted to make that very, very clear. So in the rest of the interview, he says that he was hurt by the reaction by a lot of Newcastle fans to his loan move to Man United. He says he feels like he's been loyal to the club. He gave his best. He could have left during some of the 4.5 years he was here, but he stayed and he fought relegation, and he thought the fans would appreciate that. Twitter was terrible. We know Twitter's a disgusting place for trolls. And he ends the interview by saying that everyone has to be supported and committed in this group under Eddie Howe, otherwise you don't get in. And it's a very exciting time for the club now. I'm going to just break this down bit by bit. Now, I'm going to start this by talking about what Martin Dubravka says about why he moved to Manchester United. So in this interview, just to go back, he says it was because he wanted a new challenge, but also because the amount of competitions Man United were in, he thought he might get more game time. Now, I'm going to take you back to an interview that Martin Dubravka did on the 14th of September when he moved to Manchester United, just after, where he talks about why he moved. Now, in this interview, bearing in mind what I've just said, he said recently about why he moved. In this interview, he says he spent 5 years at Newcastle. He loves it. His son was born there. His family have always been very happy. But when Manchester United called, me and my partner were both enchanted. Enchanted. That's a big word. That's sort of like Disney, Lord of the Rings, kind of Guardians of the Galaxy sort of shit. You don't hear that word used in football very often. He then goes on to say he was over the moon that it was successful to move, but also he wanted to stay in Britain. He did want to move, so that's what he said. So he'd already made his mind up. He was not fighting Nick Pope. He wanted to move. He was looking all the options. When Manchester United showed interest in me, the man in me came alive again. That's another really big statement. The man in me. So he might have been a boy at Newcastle, I don't know. Lost on the quayside. So I'm going to compare those two. So I guess it comes down to a case of which is it, Martin? And that's what I don't like about some of these interviews. They forget what they've said previously. So for me, looking at this, I always thought this about Martin Dubravka. I hate Man United and I wasn't happy about him going there, as I'm not any player. I was shocked when Martin Dubravka wanted to move because a player sucks you in, and when he's someone like a big part of the furniture like Martin Dubravka is, you get attached. Of course you do. That's how close we are to football clubs as fans. I don't like how I don't know. How I look at Martin Dubravka with this one is, as a Slovakian grown up, Manchester United huge. And it pains me to say it, they're a huge club. For a team like that to come in, everything he said on the first interview, how he was enchanted, how the man came alive, he had wet dreams over the thought of playing for Man United. Imagine the Slovakians finding out Martin Dubravka plays for Man United. Shit. And it was the dream move for him, and he was never in a million Sundays going to turn it down just to be associated to Man United in his head as a dream. And that's fair enough. I don't expect him to be supporting Newcastle as a Slovakian kid growing up playing football on the streets with his pals. It's going to be Man United. Maybe Newcastle in 10 years, who knows, under the new ownership. And the fact he's done 2 different interviews and he's talking about now the only reason he went is because there was more competitions he could play in. That's the first part, and the two don't add up, and he forgets he's done these previous interviews, and I think players are badly advised, which I'll touch on in a second. The second part, now, the abuse he's received, that's awful, that's idiots, that's a small minority of this fan base that will always exist. Probably aren't, a lot of them aren't even Newcastle fans, just wanting a reason to hurl abuse at someone to get their kicks from somewhere because they hate the job, they hate their lives, whatever. Martin Dubravka, 24 hours after he moved to Manchester United, went on his Instagram, just to jog some of your memories, and put a photo on his Instagram, sat in his living room, watching Man United on the telly. I think they were playing in Europe that night, and he put, "Come on, United." Come on, Martin. And it left a bitter taste in all of our mouths. It went viral. And Martin Dubravka only did that because, firstly, he knows Newcastle are called United, and it was a, fuck you. I'm going to a bigger club. I'm watching my team play in Europe. I could not give a shit about your Nick Pope or whatever you guys are up to. I'm on to pastures new. Life is good. And it was like putting a fishing rod out. And I'm not saying that means that abuse is okay. That's the last thing I'm saying. But what will come with that is fans getting that voice heard, getting angry, and venting about it on social media. So you could argue... I'm going to say you could argue. It's almost fact. Martin Dubravka only put that on his story for a reaction. Whatever he was riled up on that night, whether he'd had a couple of cans, whether he'd had a couple of monsters, I don't know. The adrenaline was pumping and he stuck that on. And 24 hours after you've played 5 years for a team who apparently your son loves, your son adores because he was born here, your wife adores, you love Newcastle. It's unheard of for a player to do that, especially when it's only a loan. He could have got an injury in day 1 of training at Man United and had to come back. And that gets conveniently missed out in this interview. He just talks about getting abuse from Newcastle fans. He doesn't understand why he got the reaction he got. Martin, I'm going to tell you now, a big part of the reaction you got was for that fucking stupid post you put on your Instagram. But again, conveniently forgotten about. Now... he talked at the start, as I mentioned at the start, about how Nick Pope came in. That created a difficult situation for him. A football club grows by getting competition for places. If you do not have competition for your place, that is probably a football club that's not going many places. And goalkeeper, you can maybe argue, is a little bit of an exception to that rule in some cases, because your backup is normally you're always your backup. It can only be healthy to have competition. And Nick Pope only played one game against Nottingham Forest. Before that, in pre-season, they rotated 45 minutes each. Nick Pope against Nottingham Forest had very little to do. We battered them that day. We had about 21 shots at goal. We eventually scored in the second half through Fabian Schär and Wilson, but we weren't troubled at all. We dominated. So for Dubravka to say that he had a difficult situation after one league game, that's just his ego being hit. He did not want to fight. It was basically him annoyed that Nick Pope's come into his house, taking a shit on his toilet, cracked open one of his beers and sat in his armchair in the living room. And he wasn't willing to fight for that. It was a pride thing. And that's what I don't like about this interview. Not only does it not back up what he said in September when everything was rosy, Martin Dubravka did not want to come back to Newcastle. And I said that in January. He didn't. He fucked up in his games that he played for Man United. I watched him in one in the Carabao. He was awful. He made mistakes. Erik ten Hag wasn't impressed. There was never going to be an option to buy there. That went down the pan, and they sent him back. Eddie Howe took him back, and obviously that worked out okay with regards to where we were at the time with goalkeepers. I know Karius has come in. He never wanted to come back. I don't care what anyone says. Man United didn't work out for him, and it was a tail between the legs job, and he got thrown in against Sheffield Wednesday. It wasn't his fault that we lost that day, to be totally honest with you. You could maybe argue one of the goals he did better with, but generally speaking, he didn't want to come back to us. And I feel like PR teams for footballers just need to say, Martin, not now. Because for me, this isn't an interview you do when you're still playing for that team. This is an interview you do maybe after you move to a Leicester in the summer. Because Martin Dubravka's going to be on his way out, let's face it. A Lazio, a Slovakia, wherever he goes next, wherever in Europe with his missus and his kids, do an interview about that move. What happened with that move, Martin? Tell us. The fact that he's still playing for us and he's done this interview that doesn't mention what he put on social media, even if it said I put a post out there that I maybe regret that maybe didn't go down well, he will know that all the abuse he got was aimed at that story. It was on his Instagram story. The amount of comments he must have got fired his way for that. I just don't like it. This interview didn't sit very well with me. Is that because I don't like Man United? Well, that's partly because but it's mainly because I've just told you facts of other things he said, and I just think players should just zip it. Play football, get your head down, fight Nick Pope. Nick Pope could get injured tomorrow, Martin, and you'd be back in. You could play amazing, and then Nick Pope's got to fight his way back in. The abuse is awful. I'm not condoning that, but this interview, nah. I didn't like it. I read it over my morning coffee this morning and I still don't like it. And the further I've dissected it, just doesn't add up. He needs someone better working alongside him for his PR. But Newcastle fans, if you've never heard this interview or you have, give us your thoughts. Maybe you totally disagree. You're still a huge Martin Dubravka fan, which I would totally understand. And you think everything's tickety-boo. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm going to sign off on that one. It just didn't sit well with me. Bitter taste, so why not do a video? The next video will probably be an Arsenal match preview on that juicy, in the words of Jacob Murphy, juicy game. Title race versus Champions League. Rocking St James's Park. Bank holiday Sunday. Cannot wait. So I'll see you on that next match preview video, Newcastle fans. And enjoy the rest of your week. Away the lads!